Greetings. Today's lecture is on Thelin's Chapter 9, A New Life Begins, Reconfiguring American Higher Education in the 21st Century. Thelin opens the chapter noting the trouble from the 1990s that is carried over into the emerging 21st century and asks the question, why must we protect higher education? He notes endowments, state appropriations, and donor contributions are on the decline. This is a result of the down economy and the rise in healthcare and prison costs that compete with education, both K-12 and higher education, for money from the state. Congress begins to pay attention to federal financial aid loan and grant programs. Because of the first bullet point, students are relying more heavily on financial aid programs to fund their education, while the cost of higher education is rising higher than inflation. This particularly harms the middle class. Federal campus research dollars from agencies like the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation decline and become more competitive. Campuses rely heavily on these dollars for facilities and administration distribution that go towards investment in research and development, as well as basic campus infrastructure, like keeping the lights on and the air conditioning running. It is both risky and expensive to compete with the big players noted in the book, and often the smaller institutions have to subsidize this work with the hopes that more money will eventually come that will make the research and development enterprise self-sustaining. The big grant agencies like NSF award points to proposals who have faculty who have already received NSF grants, so it becomes a kind of club that only certain personnel can enter. The Knight Commission reports no control on athletic program spending. Only 17 of the 300 athletic programs nationwide actually make money and are self-supporting, as compliance to Title IX and NCAA requirements are quite costly, so most programs rely on heavy subsidies from the university to run. The rationale for allowing this is the national visibility sports teams provide and the subsequent stronger affiliation from donors and alumni to support all university programs. Yet the entitlement that the few that are self-supporting permeate all institutions. Retention rates and graduation rates are on the decline. We go from being the most educated society in the world to boasting the highest college dropout rates in the world, as much of our world competitors have come to the higher education gate. It is not that we have fallen behind, it's just that others are surpassing us. And finally, he notes that professional associations raise academic concerns. He notes professional fields from medicine to teaching are being questioned on their responsiveness to their, quote, customers, and preparation programs are put on the defensive. Worldwide, the quality, rigor, and reputation of the American higher education system remains number one. The U.S. is envied from academics to research and development to campus life, but issues from the 20th century are still causing angst in the early years of the 21st century, as noted before. The booming for-profit market made up 10% of the market in 2010 and grows each year. Public and private institutions had not considered them true competitors until the 21st century, but times had been changing and students wanted a different kind of college experience. Yet their predatory practices were being taken note by Congress as well as the public, with concerns of their heavy reliance on federal financial aid, the high dropout and loan default rates, and their exaggerated claims about their graduate employment prospects. Incorporating distance learning into the traditional environment was the strength of for-profit schools that public and private institutions, for the most part, looked down on as less quality education until the last decade or so. Institutions like the University of Phoenix drew the attention of the underserved and neglected population, those working adults who wanted to earn a bachelor's and later graduate degree by providing flexibility and convenience. Public and private institutions have never been known for their flexibility and convenience, but have moved into distance learning as they saw their market shrinking as for-profits became real competitors, particularly in graduate education. Managing the diversity of higher education institutions and students has proved to be difficult over the last few years. There were too many players and most were struggling financially to keep their doors open. Out of these concerns, Obama has invested in the minority serving institutions we've discussed in class. Some state flagship campuses have gone to a minority majority, and Latino students have become an increasingly visible and vocal constituency group in higher education. We also see the greater representation and even over-representation of women in college life, from sports to academic disciplines and professional schools to tenure track faculty positions and into administration. Thelin also notes the problem of relying on underfunded community colleges to bridge the achievement and attainment gap, particularly among low-achieving students. This was of concern as the completion and transfer rates were dismal, but finally there was some ownership that community colleges were not funded well to handle this charge, nor organized in such a way to do this well. State institutions are heavily investing in the branding and priority of athletics and medicine. We see this at UCCS, with us having brought on board new athletic teams over the past few years. And next year we will have a women's lacrosse team, men's baseball team, and we'll be expanding track and field. This requires new investments from fields to coaches to scholarships. Additionally, almost all of the growth on Nevada is linked to medicine, from the Lane Center to the City of Champions. The idea is to have a mini medical campus here, which requires new investments from facilities to personnel to an infrastructure for grant procurement. Both bring high visibility to an institution, a new source of revenue, but very expensive initial and continual investment, and serve a public good. The increase in television revenues, ticket sales, major donations, Medicaid payments, federal grants, and fees from clinics make this an attractive investment, but both are susceptible to great losses, which then requires the university to bail them out. If there is an unexpected downturn in patients, a change in Medicaid or Medicare reimbursements, or volatility in the economy, big trouble arises, and losing seasons result in a decline in ticket revenues and television deals that cause financial concerns for athletics. Yet they too are too big to fail, and as noted by Thelin, campuses have no choice but to subsidize these efforts. An ex-president of the University of Colorado system famously said, "We are going from a state-supported to a state-located institution." As funding for state institutions has dwindled, it is true that state appropriations have declined as a percentage of annual budgets, but institutions have also become more complex, which have expanded the annual operating budgets of all institutions. Due to self-initiated federally sponsored research programs, medical centers, auxiliary services, and many others, the base budget has expanded, so state appropriations as a percentage declined, but actual dollars have increased. Trends of rising administrative salaries and expansion of the number of top administrators is pervasive. We certainly see this at UCCS. The number of top administrators with vice chancellor in their title has almost doubled in the past 10 years, and all but one of those positions was filled without a search, and in times of no raises and hiring freezes for new and replacement positions in other faculty and staff areas. Restricted versus unrestricted money, as identified by Thelin, there are areas of campus that are flush with cash and others that are not, and the conversation always goes back to what is restricted and what is not. I find it very interesting that Thelin was suggesting that sports teams should pay a fee for their facilities, as that is what UCCS requires. And student consumerism culture requires aesthetically pleasing buildings, from residence halls to fitness centers to dining halls to parking facilities, and slick recruitment campaigns to draw students to college. Thelin notes that non-instructional items have risen faster than investments in core academic programs as a result of this rise in student consumerism culture. The organizing structures of colleges and universities make higher education unique to other corporations and often hostile to innovations, with the ideas of shared governance, academic freedom, and tenure at its foundation. Shared governance holds that faculty, top administrators like the president or chancellor, and boards of trustees or regents share in decision-making responsibilities, from educating the next generation to research and development to the whole enterprise of an institution. Yet pointed out by Thelin, there is little accountability or checks and balances within the system, as pretty much autonomy is what is desired. Thelin also raises concerns about the rise of presidents and board members with no background in higher education. Academic freedom protects faculty in their free search for truth and its free exposition. Thus, freedom in research is fundamental to the advancement of truth, and freedom in teaching is fundamental for the protection of the rights of professors in what and how students learn. So the right to teach and research as the professor sees fit is core to academic freedom and doesn't lend itself to standardization of the academic enterprise. Tenure looks slightly different at each institution, but has more commonality than difference. At CU, the reappointment, promotion, and tenure process is a 2-4-6 process, meaning you are reviewed in your second, fourth, and sixth year. In your second year, you're going through reappointment, which is really a look at your research agenda that you have established early on, how well the teaching is, and if you are providing proper service. In the fourth year, you are going under comprehensive review, so you also are being reviewed on teaching, research, and service, but you also have people from outside the institution being asked to write letters of recommendation on your ability to move forward in the tenure process. And in the sixth year, that is repeated, and that is where you would earn tenure and move into a promotion. Tenure is a contractual right of a professor not to have his or her position terminated without just cause. Once tenure is achieved, it is very difficult to either remove that person from the university or to require a faculty member to perform in any specific way. For example, if the bookstore asks for all required books to be submitted by a certain date, and only 10% responded by the due date for this fall, and there are absolutely no repercussions, and yet students will have to pay more for books, and the university will lose revenue because students will find more competitive pricing elsewhere. While this is a trivial example in the whole scheme of things, this points to a structural issue that is inherent in the system. Faculty receive and expect consultation in the running of the university, yet there is very little accountability in what they were required to do once they have achieved tenure or even in a tenure track position. Many point to this disconnect as an impediment to being purposeful about the changes necessary in higher education to successfully move into the future. Thelin ends the book noting the criticisms of the organizational structure of higher education, and although they are being heard, history and tradition are on its side to remain as is. So I end with posing the questions that he posed. Do you think higher education has drifted from its essential educational purpose? And is the organizational structure to blame? One of the final exam essay question asks you to consider the recommendations you would provide to turn the tide of higher education, meaning to reform higher education and the role student affairs should play in your recommendations. I look forward to hearing your responses.